They invited the disabled girl as a joke, but she arrived like a goddess. Lily Miller held the golden envelope with trembling hands, reading for the 10th time the invitation written in elegant letters to the New York Philanthropic Society Gala. At 22, she had never imagined she would receive an invitation to the city's most exclusive event, where only the New York City elite had access. The young woman ran to the small sewing workshop where she worked downtown, interrupting the afternoon silence with her contagious excitement. Mrs. Dorothy, the owner of the establishment, looked up from the fabric she was embroidering and saw Lily waving the invitation in the air as if it were a trophy she had won. "Mrs. Dorothy, look what arrived for me today," exclaimed Lily, her eyes shining with happiness. "Someone invited me to the gala ball. They must have seen my embroidery in the window and liked my work." Dorothy took the invitation from the young woman's hands and examined every detail. The paper was of superior quality, with gold embossing and the Philanthropic Society's crest printed perfectly. There was no identified sender, only her name handwritten in refined calligraphy. "This must cost a fortune, girl," murmured Dorothy, frowning. "Who could have sent this to you? Are you sure it's not a mistake?" "No mistake at all," replied Lily, taking the invitation back and pressing it to her chest. "My name is written correctly, Lily Miller. Someone finally recognized my talent." For the last 3 years, Lily had dedicated herself intensely to sewing, creating unique pieces with embroidery that caught the attention of anyone who passed by the workshop window. Her delicate hands transformed simple fabrics into true works of art, but Dorothy rarely allowed her to serve customers, claiming it was better for her to stay in the back working. That afternoon, while Lily dreamed of the ball on the other side of town, in a mansion on the Upper East Side, 4 rich young men were enjoying the success of their latest prank. Caleb Harrington, 25, son of businessman Richard Harrington, showed his friends a video on his phone where Lily was walking down the street with the envelope in her hands. "Look how she believed it," laughed Caleb, swiping his finger across the screen. "It's going to be hilarious to see her face when she finds out it was all a joke." "Are you sure she'll show up?" asked Tyler, one of the friends, sipping French champagne. "What if she finds out beforehand?" "Impossible," Caleb retorted arrogantly. "People like her don't question these things. They're too simple to suspect. We'll film everything and post it on social media. It'll go viral." The other 3 young men laughed loudly, imagining the views the video could get. To them, Lily was nothing but cheap entertainment, a cruel way to amuse themselves on a boring Thursday afternoon. Meanwhile, in the small apartment she shared with her mother in the Astoria neighborhood, Lily showed the invitation to Margaret Miller, a 58-year-old seamstress who had raised her daughter alone after being widowed early. "Mom, look at this beautiful thing," said Lily, dancing around the small living room. "I'll be able to show everyone that I know how to behave anywhere." Margaret examined the invitation with suspicion. 20 years of raising her daughter alone had taught her to be cautious about anything that seemed too good to be true. She knew the world better than Lily, and knew that people like them were rarely included in high social circles without a specific reason. "Beer, my dear, this doesn't smell right to me," said Margaret, handing the invitation back carefully. "Since when does high society invite people like us to their events?" "Mom, don't say that," protested Lily, putting the invitation inside the Bible she kept on the coffee table. "My work is good. Everyone says so. Mrs. Dorothy always says my embroidery is the best she's ever seen." "Mrs. Dorothy says that, but she doesn't let you attend to the important clients," retorted Margaret with the sincerity only a mother can have. "If your work were so valued, why do you earn only minimum wage?" The question hit Lily squarely, but she tried to disguise the pain she felt. It was true that Dorothy never put her in the front of the shop when elegant clients arrived, always claiming it would be better for her to keep working in the back, where she could concentrate better. "You don't understand, Mom," murmured Lily, sitting on the faded sofa. "This invitation is my chance to prove I'm capable of so much more. I've always dreamed of going to places like that, with elegant people, intelligent conversations." Margaret sighed deeply. She had known that sparkle in her daughter's eyes since childhood. Lily had always been a dreamer, imagining herself in situations that seemed impossible for someone of her social standing. Not that Margaret wanted to limit her daughter's dreams, but experience had taught her the world could be cruel to people who were different. The next morning, Lily woke up even more determined to attend the gala. She had spent the night researching social etiquette online, noting every detail about how to behave at formal events. Her notebooks were full of information about proper greetings, table manners, and appropriate conversation topics. "Mom, I need a dress," she announced during breakfast, biting into the bread with jam that Margaret had prepared. "Something elegant that shows I belong there." "With what money, Lily?" asked Margaret, trying to stay calm. "Our budget barely covers the monthly bills. A dress for that kind of party must cost more than our rent." "We could borrow one, or I could sew one," suggested Lily, her eyes shining with possibilities. "I have fabrics saved. I can create something unique." Margaret looked at her daughter and saw such determination that she felt her heart tighten. Part of her wanted to protect Lily from possible humiliation, but another part admired the courage and unshakable faith the young woman showed. In the sewing workshop, Mrs. Dorothy noticed that Lily was more distracted than usual. The young woman was embroidering mechanically, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. During the lunch break, Dorothy decided to talk to her. "Lily, about this invitation," began Dorothy, choosing her words carefully. "Are you sure you want to get into this? People like us aren't usually welcome in those environments." "Why is everyone talking like this?" Lily vented, setting aside the sandwich she had barely touched. "I'm a person just like anyone else. I know how to converse, I know how to behave, I know how to work better than a lot of people out there." Dorothy sighed, recognizing that Lily was right about her abilities. The young woman was truly talented, polite, and hard-working. The problem wasn't with her, but with a world that often refused to look beyond appearances. That same day, after work, Lily decided to visit Mrs. Evelyn, a 73-year-old lady who lived on the floor above the building where she and her mother lived. Evelyn had been a professional seamstress for decades and occasionally gave advice on more advanced techniques. "Mrs. Evelyn, can you help me?" asked Lily, lightly tapping on the slightly open apartment door. "Come in, dear," replied Evelyn, who was watering her plants on the small balcony. "What do you need today?" Lily told her about the invitation and her dilemma with the dress. Evelyn listened attentively, observing the sparkle in the young woman's eyes and the sincerity in her voice. When Lily finished speaking, the woman remained silent for several minutes, seeming to ponder something important. "Come with me," Evelyn finally said, leading Lily to the bedroom. "I want to show you something I've kept for a long time." From the back of the closet, Evelyn retrieved a carefully sealed cardboard box. Inside it, protected by tissue paper yellowed with time, was a party dress that took Lily's breath away. It was emerald green, with sequin embroidery that caught the light like tiny stars. "This dress belonged to my daughter Sarah," explained Evelyn, running her hands over the fabric affectionately. "She passed away very young at 28, a victim of pneumonia we couldn't treat in time. She never had the chance to wear this dress for the special occasion it was made for." Lily was speechless. The dress was absolutely stunning, clearly handmade with sophisticated techniques that demonstrated years of experience and dedication. Every detail had been carefully planned and executed to perfection. "Sarah was also different," Evelyn continued, her voice heavy with emotion. "Not like you, but she had struggles people didn't understand. She suffered from severe depression, something nobody talked about openly back then. People judged her as lazy or weak." "Mrs. Evelyn, Lily began, but the woman gently interrupted her. "I want you to wear this dress to your gala," Evelyn said with determination. "Sarah always dreamed of attending elegant events, of being accepted by others for who she was inside, not for the problems she faced. Perhaps through you, that dream can come true." Lily felt tears welling in her eyes. This woman's generosity and the story behind the dress touched her heart deeply. She accepted the gift with the solemnity of someone receiving a sacred responsibility. When Margaret learned about the borrowed dress, her initial reaction was resistance. She went up to Evelyn's apartment to talk in person, worried that her daughter was getting involved in situations that could hurt her emotionally. "Evelyn, with all due respect, I don't think you should encourage Lily in this fantasy," said Margaret, accepting a cup of coffee. That world isn't for people like us. They'll humiliate my daughter." "Margaret, I understand your concern," Evelyn replied calmly. "But your daughter has exceptional talent and an inner strength I rarely see in people of any age. Perhaps it's time to let her show the world who she really is." The two women talked for over an hour, each defending her perspective with passion. Margaret feared for her daughter, while Evelyn believed Lily deserved the chance to shine. In the end, they reached an agreement. Lily would go to the gala, but with specific safety conditions and an exit plan if things didn't go well. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. Meanwhile, at the Harrington mansion, Richard Harrington arrived home from work when he found Caleb and his friends planning details of the prank in the Home Office. Richard stopped at the door upon hearing fragments of the conversation that deeply disturbed him. "Dad," said Caleb, trying to disguise what they were doing, "we didn't expect you home so early." "What are you all planning?" asked Richard, entering the office and noticing papers scattered on the desk. "I heard you talking about filming someone." The boys exchanged nervous glances. Tyler tried to hide some documents, but Richard had already seen enough to understand something wasn't right. With his business experience, he quickly identified signs that the young men were plotting something questionable. "Caleb, I want a full explanation." "Now," ordered Richard, using the tone he reserved for important negotiations. Reluctantly, Caleb confessed about the fake invitation sent to Lily. He tried to downplay the situation, claiming it was just a harmless prank, but Richard grew increasingly outraged as he heard the details of the plan. "You did this to an innocent young woman?" exploded Richard, his voice echoing through the office. "How dare you play with someone's feelings like that?" "Dad, relax," tried Caleb, clearly uncomfortable with his father's reaction. "It's just a joke. People like her wouldn't understand anyway." Caleb's phrase was like a punch to Richard's gut. Painful memories surfaced, reminding him of his younger sister, Alice, who had been born with Down syndrome and faced similar prejudices throughout her life, before passing away at 35. "Get out of my office," said Richard in a low, dangerous voice. "All of you. And Caleb, we are going to have a very serious talk tomorrow morning." When the young men left, Richard was alone, feeling the weight of memories and anger. He remembered how Alice dreamed of being socially accepted, how she practiced conversations in front of the mirror, hoping for an opportunity that never came. The situation with Lily had awakened old wounds he thought he had overcome. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He spent hours thinking about Alice and the young woman his son had chosen as the target of a cruel joke. By morning, his decision was made. He needed to meet Lily personally and somehow repair the damage his son had caused. Richard hired a private investigator to find basic information about Lily and her family. What he discovered impressed him. The young woman was known in the area for the quality of her handicraft work, helped elderly neighbors for free, and maintained exemplary behavior despite the financial difficulties she faced. While Richard investigated Lily, the young woman was immersed in intense preparations for the gala. She had managed to book an appointment at a modest neighborhood beauty salon, saving for weeks to pay for the service. Margaret accompanied her, still reluctant but determined to support her daughter in her decision. At the salon, the receptionist looked Lily up and down with suspicion when she mentioned needing to get ready for a formal event. The professional clearly didn't believe someone like Lily would attend that kind of event. "Are you sure it's for yourself?" asked the hairstylist Tiffany when Margaret explained they wanted an elegant hairstyle. "Because if it's for someone else, I can teach you how to do it at home." "It is for my daughter," Margaret replied firmly, "and we want the best service you offer." Tiffany hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, but the money was on the table, and she needed the work. During the service, however, her attitude gradually changed. Lily demonstrated surprising knowledge about hairstyling techniques, discussing historical styles and trends, with a command that impressed the professional. "Where did you learn all this?" asked Tiffany, genuinely curious as she worked on Lily's hair. "I read a lot about fashion and beauty," Lily replied simply. "I like to understand how things work, not just how to do them." Around noon that Friday, Richard Harrington parked his black Summit on the street where the sewing workshop was located. He had decided that the best way to get to know Lily would be to observe her in her work environment, personally assessing the character of the young woman his son had chosen to humiliate. Disguising himself as a regular customer, Richard entered the workshop and feigned interest in repair services. Dorothy attended to him promptly, clearly impressed by the appearance and bearing of the elegant visitor. "I need someone to repair some old embroidery on a very special piece," said Richard, showing a shirt he had brought as a pretext. "It's delicate work that requires exceptional skill." "You've come to the right place," Dorothy assured him, examining the piece. "We have an embroidery specialist who is, well, she's very good at what she does." Richard noticed the hesitation in Dorothy's voice, as if she was about to say something more, but held back. He insisted on meeting personally who would do the work, claiming the piece had great sentimental value. Dorothy called Lily from the back of the workshop. When the young woman appeared, drying her hands on a cloth and smiling politely, Richard felt a tightening in his heart. She physically resembled Alice, but there was something more, a light in her eyes that radiated intelligence and genuine kindness. "Lily, this gentleman needs a special repair," explained Dorothy. "Can you take a look at the piece?" Lily examined the shirt with professional care, her delicate hands identifying exactly where the problem was and how it could be resolved. She explained to Richard the necessary process, suggesting alternatives and demonstrating a technical knowledge that impressed even someone who had hired the best artisans for his company. "How long would it take?" asked Richard, observing Lily's every reaction. "About 3 hours of concentrated work," she answered honestly. "It's delicate, but it's not difficult. Would you like to leave it today?" Richard was touched by the young woman's sincerity and professionalism. There was no artifice or pretense in her response, only genuine competence and a desire to do good work. In that moment he understood that his son had not chosen a fragile victim, but rather a person with dignity and talent who deserved respect. "Actually," said Richard, making a sudden decision, "I would like to speak with you about some larger projects I have in mind. Would you have a few minutes?" Dorothy made a move to intervene, probably to protect Lily or take control of the negotiation, but Richard gently indicated he would like to speak directly with the artisan. Lily agreed to the conversation, intrigued by the unexpected opportunity. Seated at a small table in the back of the workshop, Richard watched Lily as she showed some of her personal creations that she kept in an organized portfolio. Each piece was professionally photographed and accompanied by detailed technical descriptions that demonstrated not only artistic talent, but also planning and execution ability. "These pieces are extraordinary," Richard said sincerely. "Did you study design, or are you self-taught?" "Self-taught, actually," Lily replied modestly. "I've always liked creating beautiful things. My mother taught me the basics of sewing, but the rest I learned on my own, testing, making mistakes, trying again." Richard was even more impressed. Lily's natural talent, combined with her dedication and humility, created a professional profile that many people educated at expensive schools couldn't achieve. During the conversation, Richard noticed that Lily was clearly excited about something beyond work. She had a special sparkle in her eyes and a contained energy that suggested anticipation for some important event. "You seem to be expecting something special," Richard commented delicately. "Oh, it's just that—" Lily hesitated, clearly debating whether to share. "I received an invitation to a very elegant event. It will be the first time I attend something like that." Richard's heart sank. There lay the confirmation that the young woman had indeed received the fake invitation and was genuinely excited about the prospect. He saw the innocence in her eyes and felt an even greater anger toward his son for choosing someone so pure for his cruel prank. "Really?" Roberto managed to reply, trying to keep his voice neutral. "What kind of event?" "The New York Philanthropic Society Gala," said Beatrice, clearly proud. "I think someone must have seen my work and liked it. It's an incredible opportunity to show that people like me can also attend these environments." Roberto felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The phrase "people like me" revealed that Beatrice was aware of the prejudices she faced, yet still held hope and faith in human kindness. This made Tiago's joke even more despicable. Bidding farewell to Beatrice with a promise to return to discuss future projects, Roberto left the workshop with a heavy heart and renewed determination. He had found in Beatrice not only an innocent victim, but an extraordinary person who deserved far more than the world offered her. That night, Roberto confronted Tiago again, but this time with concrete information about who Beatrice really was. The conversation was tense and revealing, exposing fundamental differences in values between father and son. "You met her?" asked Tiago, suspicious, when Roberto began describing the encounter at the workshop. "I met a talented, hard-working and honest young woman who doesn't deserve to be humiliated by privileged family sons who don't know the value of anything," Roberto replied coldly. "Dad, you're exaggerating," Tiago tried. "It's just a prank. She won't even realize it's a joke." "She will realize it," said Roberto with certainty. "And when she does, it will hurt much more because she is genuinely excited and hopeful. You are playing with the dreams of someone who has very little in life." The argument intensified when Roberto revealed he knew the complete details of the plan, including the intention to film everything for social media. The discovery that the humiliation would be public and permanent raised his indignation to a level Tiago had never seen. "Cancel this nonsense now," ordered Roberto, "and if you don't cancel, I will personally go to that girl and tell her the truth." "You can't do that," protested Tiago. "The guys have already paid the bet. We've already planned everything." Roberto grew even more furious upon discovering that money was involved in the bet. For him, this transformed the situation from a cruel joke into something close to the financial exploitation of another's humiliation. On Saturday morning, the eve of the gala, Beatrice woke with a mix of nervousness and excitement that kept her from staying still. She had spent the entire week practicing posture, greetings and conversation, turning the small apartment into a training ground for social etiquette. Conceição watched her daughter's preparations with conflicting feelings. On one hand, she admired Beatrice's dedication and determination. On the other, she felt a growing apprehension she couldn't fully explain. "Bea, are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" asked Conceição for the 10th time that morning. "Mom, we've already talked about this," Beatrice replied patiently. "It's my chance to show that I can adapt to any environment, and who knows, maybe I'll make important contacts for my work." Herminia came down to the Santos apartment around 10 o'clock, carrying a small case with accessories she had selected to complement Marina's dress. Inside the case was a set of delicate jewelry, a small hand-embroidered purse, and shoes that, though old, were still in perfect condition. "These belong to Marina," explained Herminia, showing each item with affection. She chose each piece thinking of the special occasion that never came. "Today, through you, that occasion is finally going to happen." Lily Miller held the jewels with reverence, understanding the emotional weight of the moment. It wasn't just about dressing elegantly. She was carrying the dreams and hopes of a woman who left too soon. "Mrs. Evelyn, I will honor your daughter's memory," Lily promised solemnly. "I will conduct myself in a way that would make her proud." The three women spent the afternoon adjusting the final details of the look. Margaret, despite her reservations, dedicated herself to making her daughter's hair perfect, creating a sophisticated hairstyle that enhanced Lily's natural beauty. Evelyn took care of the accessories and makeup, applying techniques she had learned decades ago. When Lily looked at herself in the mirror for the first time fully ready, she could hardly recognize her own image. The emerald green dress had transformed her into someone who seemed to naturally belong in the world's most elegant ballrooms. "My God," whispered Margaret, moved. "You look absolutely stunning." "Sarah would be radiant," added Evelyn, drying a tear. "You are carrying her dream to fulfillment." That same Saturday afternoon, Richard Harrington made a decision that would completely change the course of events. He cancelled his weekend work commitments and dedicated the entire day to developing a plan to protect Lily from the humiliation that awaited her. First, Richard called Victoria Sterling, head organizer of the New York Philanthropic Society Gala, and a longtime family acquaintance. Victoria was shocked when she learned about the planned joke against Lily. "Richard, this is absolutely unacceptable," said Victoria over the phone. "How dare Caleb use our event for this kind of cruel prank?" "Victoria, I need your help," requested Richard. "The young woman will attend the ball believing she was legitimately invited. I don't want her to be humiliated, but I also don't want to destroy her dreams by revealing the truth prematurely." Victoria, who had known Richard's sister and was aware of his sensitivity regarding inclusion issues, immediately offered to collaborate. Together they developed a plan that would ensure not only that Lily was treated with respect, but that she also had a truly special night. "I will assign our best staff to receive her," Victoria assured. "And I have some ideas to turn her presence into something positive for everyone attending." Victoria had built her reputation organizing events that not only entertained, but also inspired and educated. The idea of using the situation to promote awareness about inclusion and respect for diversity genuinely excited her. Meanwhile, Caleb and his friends were finalizing preparations to film the prank. They had rented professional quality recording equipment, planning to capture every moment of Lily's supposed humiliation in high definition. "Dude, this is going to get more views than anything we've ever posted," said Tyler, testing one of the cameras. "People love this kind of content." "I just don't understand why my dad is making such a big deal," commented Caleb, clearly annoyed by his father's interference. "It's just a joke. She won't even fully understand what's happening." The friends agreed with Caleb, displaying the same lack of empathy and understanding that had led them to plan the joke in the first place. To them, Lily was nothing more than entertainment, someone whose humanity they were incapable of recognizing. On Sunday morning, the day of the ball, Lily woke up at 5 a.m., unable to sleep due to anxiety and excitement. She had prepared a detailed schedule for the day, including specific times for each step of the preparation. Margaret found her daughter in the kitchen, reading for the 100th time a book on social etiquette she had borrowed from the neighborhood library. Lily was completely immersed in studies on how to behave at the table, what conversation topics were appropriate, and how to greet people from different social positions. "Honey, you've studied more for this gala than some people study to graduate from college," observed Margaret with a sad smile. "I want to be prepared for everything," Lily replied determinedly. "I won't give anyone a reason to say I don't belong there." Lily's dedication deeply touched Margaret. She realized that regardless of what happened at the gala, the experience had already positively transformed her daughter, giving her a clear goal and raising her self-esteem. Around 2 in the afternoon, Richard decided it was time to take more direct action. He went personally to the Millers' apartment, determined to speak with Lily and her family before it was too late. When Richard rang the bell of the small apartment, Margaret answered suspiciously. The presence of a clearly wealthy and well-dressed man at her door immediately put her on alert. "Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Richard Harrington. I would like to speak with you and your daughter Lily about a very important matter," said Richard with all the delicacy he could muster. "What do you want with my daughter?" asked Margaret without opening the door completely. "I know about the invitation she received for the gala," explained Richard, "and I need to tell you some information that may be important for tonight's decision." The mention of the gala made Margaret open the door. She suspected she would finally discover the truth behind the mysterious invitation that had left the whole family intrigued. Lily appeared in the living room, still in her robe, with her hair in rollers, clearly in the middle of preparations. When she saw Richard, she immediately recognized him as the elegant customer who had visited the sewing workshop. "You!" exclaimed Lily, surprised. "What are you doing here?" "Lily, I need to tell you and your mother something very difficult," said Richard, sitting on the edge of the small sofa. "About the invitation you received." Richard then revealed the whole truth about the prank planned by Caleb and his friends. He explained how they had specifically chosen Lily to humiliate her, how they intended to film everything for social media, and how the invitation had been sent with completely cruel intentions. The silence that followed the revelation was deafening. Lily became completely paralyzed, as if she couldn't process the information she had just received. Margaret, on the other hand, exploded in a fury Richard had never witnessed. "I knew it," shouted Margaret, standing up abruptly. "I knew it was too good to be true. How dare they play with my daughter like this?" Lily finally reacted, but not with anger. Instead, she began to cry silently, tears streaming down her face as all the hope and excitement of the past weeks crumbled around her. "Why me?" asked Lily between sobs. "What did I do wrong to deserve this?" Richard felt his heart break, seeing the young woman's genuine pain. He approached her carefully, sitting beside her on the sofa. "You did nothing wrong, Lily," said Richard softly. "The mistake was entirely theirs. You are an extraordinary person who didn't deserve to go through this." "So I can't go," said Lily, her voice almost inaudible. "It was all a lie. I was a fool to believe it." "Actually," said Richard, taking a deep breath, "I would like to make a different proposal for you." Richard then explained his alternative plan. He had spoken with Victoria Sterling and assured her that if Lily still wanted to attend the gala, she would be received as a legitimate, honored guest. More than that, Victoria had become genuinely interested in Lily's artisanal work and wanted to give her a platform to showcase her creations. "You're saying I can still go?" asked Lily, confused. "But everyone will know it was a joke." "Not everyone," corrected Richard. "Only my son and a few friends know about the original prank. For everyone else present, you will simply be a talented artisan who deserves recognition." Margaret looked from Richard to Lily, trying to process the complex situation that had developed. On one hand, her daughter had been the victim of unacceptable cruelty. On the other, a real opportunity had arisen to transform that cruelty into something positive. "Why are you doing this?" asked Margaret suspiciously. "What do you gain from helping us?" Richard then told them about Alice, his deceased sister, and how Lily's situation had stirred painful memories. He explained that helping Lily was, in part, a way to honor the memory of the sister who never had the opportunities she deserved. "My sister always dreamed of social acceptance," said Richard emotionally. "She died without seeing her dreams come true. Perhaps through you, Lily, I can somehow complete what she couldn't live." The sincerity in Richard's voice convinced both Lily and Margaret that his intentions were genuine. Still, the decision to go to the gala after discovering the truth about the original invitation was emotionally complex. "But what if I go and they humiliate me anyway?" asked Lily, her insecurities surfacing. "What if everyone looks at me like I'm an intruder?" "Then you hold your head high, show your dignity and prove you're a far better person than any of them," replied Margaret, surprising herself with her own determination. "My daughter will not hide because some rich boys think they can play with people." Lily's final decision to attend the gala was not motivated by naivety or blind hope, but by a mature form of courage. She understood that going to the event would be a statement that her dignity could not be destroyed by the cruel intentions of others. Richard offered to arrange transportation and accompany Lily personally to the event, but she politely refused. She wanted to arrive at the gala by her own means, maintaining her independence even while accepting the help offered. At 6 in the evening, 3 hours before the gala began, Lily began to get ready with a determination that impressed both Margaret and Evelyn. There was no more naivety in her preparations, but rather a mature resolve to face whatever situation might arise. Sarah's emerald green dress had never been more appropriate than at that moment. Lily wore it not just as elegant attire, but as armor of dignity and self-respect that would protect her from any attempted humiliation. When she looked at herself in the mirror one last time before leaving, Lily saw a strong woman who had learned about human cruelty but chosen not to be diminished by it. This inner transformation was visible in her posture and expression. Margaret accompanied her daughter to the bus stop, carrying the small embroidered bag that Evelyn had lent. The two women walked in silence, each dealing with her own emotions about what lay ahead. "Mom," said Lily before boarding the bus, "thank you for letting me try, even knowing it might go wrong." "My daughter," replied Margaret, hugging her tightly, "you are braver than I ever was. Go there and show them who you really are." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. The bus taking Lily to the city centre was packed with people returning from weekend jobs. She sat near the window, watching New York City transform as they approached the Upper East Side area where the gala would be held. During the 40-minute ride, Lily had time to fully process everything that had happened in the last few hours. The discovery about the joke, the revelation of the true intentions behind the invitation, and especially the decision to attend anyway. All of this had fundamentally changed her perspective on the night ahead. When the bus stopped at the point nearest the hotel hosting the event, Lily took a deep breath before getting off. She could see the movement of luxury cars and elegantly dressed people heading to the same destination, and for a moment she felt the old insecurity trying to return. But this time was different. She wasn't going to the gala as a naive young woman hoping for acceptance. She was going as a woman who knew her own worth and wouldn't let the cruel intentions of others define her experience. The 2-block walk to the hotel was a final mental preparation. Lily used the time to mentally review everything she had learned about etiquette, but mainly to strengthen her inner determination to maintain her dignity no matter what she encountered. Upon arriving at the hotel lobby, Lily was greeted personally by Victoria Sterling. The organizer had kept her promise to Richard and was specifically waiting for the young woman's arrival. "Lily Miller?" asked Victoria with a warm smile. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Richard told me about your exceptional talent." "Good evening," replied Lily politely, still processing the unexpectedly kind reception. "Thank you for having me." Victoria personally escorted Lily to the main ballroom, explaining along the way some details about the guests and the evening's program. Her attitude was genuinely welcoming, without any trace of condescension or artificiality. The gala hall was even more impressive than Lily had imagined. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light over elaborate decorations, creating an atmosphere of elegance that seemed straight out of a classic film. Hundreds of people chatted in groups, all impeccably dressed. When Lily entered the ballroom, some glances naturally turned toward her. But this time, contrary to what she had feared, the looks were not of contempt or cruel curiosity. They were of genuine admiration for the stunning dress she wore and the dignified posture with which she walked. Victoria introduced Lily to some guests as a talented artisan who creates unique embroidery pieces. People showed sincere interest in learning more about her work, asking intelligent questions about techniques and inspirations. "This embroidery on your dress is absolutely exceptional," commented an elegant lady who introduced herself as Eleanor Vance, an art curator. "The technique is sophisticated, but there's something more, a rare artistic sensibility." "Actually, the dress was made by an artisan I greatly admired," Lily replied honestly, "but I have other creations I'd like to show someday." Eleanor was intrigued by the response and offered to see Lily's portfolio on a future occasion. The conversation flowed naturally, with Lily demonstrating not only technical knowledge, but also a unique perspective on art and creativity. Across the ballroom, Caleb and his friends watched the scene with growing discomfort. They had arrived early to position the hidden cameras and await the perfect moment to execute their prank, but Lily's positive reception was ruining their plans. "Why is she being treated like a VIP guest?" whispered Tyler to Caleb. "Did someone find out about our plan?" "Impossible," Caleb replied, but his confidence was shaken. "Maybe it's just initial politeness. Wait for her to say something wrong, and they'll show their true colors." But as the evening progressed, it became clear that Lily would not make the mistakes Caleb expected. She moved through the hall with natural grace, participated in intelligent conversations, and demonstrated knowledge that positively surprised the other guests. Richard watched everything from a nearby table, ready to intervene if necessary, but realizing his protection was becoming unnecessary. Lily was handling the situation masterfully, turning what should have been a humiliation into a genuine personal triumph. The first major test of the evening came when dinner was served, and Lily found herself seated at a table with people she didn't know. This was the moment she had most feared, when her lack of experience with formal etiquette could be exposed. But months of careful study paid off. Lily followed the rules of etiquette naturally, participated in conversations intelligently, and demonstrated an education that impressed even the most demanding guests. "Where did you study?" asked a businessman seated to her right. "Your education is remarkable." "I'm mostly self-taught in the things I know," Lily replied modestly. "I really enjoy learning, so I read everything I can about subjects that interest me." The answer generated even more admiration. In an environment where many people had been educated at expensive schools but had little real knowledge, Lily's genuine thirst for learning stood out as something special. Caleb began to realize that his prank had turned into a disaster for himself. Instead of humiliating Lily, he was inadvertently providing her with an evening of recognition and networking that could change her professional life. "Man, this isn't going as planned," he said discreetly to Tyler. "She's doing better than half the people here." "Then let's execute Plan B," Tyler suggested. "Confront her directly, reveal in front of everyone that the invitation was fake." Caleb hesitated. Something about the dignity with which Lily was carrying herself made him uncomfortable with the idea of publicly humiliating her. For the first time since they had planned the prank, he began to question if he was doing the right thing. The crucial moment of the evening came during the musical presentation, when Victoria Sterling took the stage to make some announcements about the Philanthropic Society's future activities. She had planned a special surprise that would completely transform Lily's experience. "Tonight, we have had the pleasure of meeting an exceptional artisan," Victoria said into the microphone, gesturing toward Lily. "Lily Miller creates embroidery pieces that represent the best of American craft tradition, combining impeccable technique with unique artistic sensitivity." A spotlight turned to Lily, who was completely surprised by the public mention. The entire hall turned to her, but this time with genuine applause and real interest in learning more about her work. "I would like to invite everyone to get to know Lily's work," Victoria continued, "and we are organizing a special exhibition of her creations next month, right here in our cultural space." The revelation of the exhibition was a complete surprise, even to Richard. Victoria had taken the initiative to transform the situation into something much more meaningful than just protecting Lily from humiliation. Lily Miller stood up when requested and waved to the attendees, feeling a mix of gratitude and admiration she had never experienced before. All the preparation, all the anguish over discovering the prank had been transformed into something genuinely positive. Caleb Harrington watched the scene with a mixture of frustration and something that was beginning to resemble shame. His prank had turned into the launch of Lily's artistic career, the complete opposite of what he had planned. After the presentation, Lily was surrounded by people interested in learning more about her work. Business cards were exchanged, invitations for future projects were made, and partnerships began to be discussed right there in the hall. "I've never seen a talent like yours," said Eleanor Vance, the curator who had spoken with her earlier. "I would very much like to include your pieces in our next group exhibition." "It would be an honor," replied Lily, barely able to believe all of this was really happening. Richard watched everything from a distance, feeling a deep satisfaction seeing that his efforts had resulted in something far better than simply avoiding a humiliation. Lily wasn't just being protected, she was being genuinely celebrated for her talent. The climax of the night's transformation happened when Caleb finally decided to approach Lily. He had spent hours watching her be admired and respected by people he himself respected, and it forced him to confront the reality of who she really was. "Excuse me," said Caleb, interrupting a conversation Lily was having with a group of business people. "Could I speak with you for a moment?" Lily vaguely recognized him as someone she had seen circulating in the hall, but had no idea she was face to face with the author of the original prank. "Of course," she replied politely. "How can I help you?" Caleb led her to a more secluded corner of the hall, wrestling internally with conflicting feelings. Part of him still wanted to execute some version of his original prank, but another part, a part he didn't know well, was genuinely impressed by what he had witnessed. "I need to tell you something," Caleb began, his voice less confident than usual. "About how you received the invitation to this party." Lily looked at him attentively, but without any sign of anxiety or fear. The discovery about the original prank and her decision to attend anyway had given her an inner strength that showed in her posture. "I know about the fake invitation," Lily said calmly. "Your father told me this afternoon." Caleb was completely disconcerted. He had planned the revelation as the culminating moment of her humiliation, but finding out she already knew everything completely changed the dynamic of the situation. Knew and came anyway?" asked Caleb, genuinely confused. "I did," replied Lily with dignity, "because I realized your prank says much more about you than it does about me." The simplicity and truth of the answer hit Caleb like a punch. He had spent weeks planning an elaborate humiliation, but it was he who felt small and ashamed before Lily's serene dignity. "Why would you do that to us?" "To me?" asked Lily, not with anger but with genuine curiosity. "What did I do to deserve you wanting to hurt me?" The simple, direct question forced Caleb to confront something he had avoided during the entire planning of the prank, the fact that Lily was a real person with real feelings and that his actions would have real consequences in her life. We thought it would be funny," Caleb said lamely, realizing how pathetic his explanation sounded. "We didn't think that." "That I was a real person?" Lily completed gently. "That I had dreams and feelings like any other person?" Caleb couldn't respond. The conversation was exposing aspects of his character he preferred not to examine, forcing him to see Lily as a complete human being instead of just a target for his cruel entertainment. "You know what impresses me the most?" Lily continued. "It's that you have everything in life, a wealthy family, education, opportunities, and you chose to use those advantages to try to hurt someone who has much less than you." Lily's observation was made without malice, but its truth was devastating. Caleb realized that despite all his privileges, he had behaved in a much baser way than the young woman he had chosen as a target. "I am sorry," said Caleb, and for the first time in his life the apology was completely sincere. "You didn't deserve that." "Thank you," Lily replied simply. "I accept your apology." The ease with which she forgave surprised Caleb even more. He had expected anger, tears, or at least resentment, but found only mature dignity and genuine forgiveness. The rest of the night unfolded like a dream for Lily. She continued to be introduced to interesting people, discussed real professional opportunities, and experienced for the first time in her life what it was like to be truly valued for her talent and personality. When the gala ended, around midnight, Lily had collected dozens of business cards and scheduled several meetings for the following week. What began as a cruel joke had transformed into the night that would change her professional life forever. Richard approached her before her departure, clearly moved by everything he had witnessed. "Lily, you were absolutely extraordinary tonight," he said sincerely. "I'm sure my sister Alice would be very proud of you." "Thank you for everything, Mr. Richard," Lily replied. "For telling me the truth, for giving me the choice to come anyway, and for showing me that there are good people in the world." "The credit is all yours," insisted Richard. "You turned cruelty into beauty, humiliation into triumph. It's a lesson all of us here learned today." The trip back home was completely different from the way there. Lily was exhausted but radiant, processing everything that had happened and barely able to believe it was real. In her small purse, she carried dozens of professional contacts that represented a future she had never dared to dream of. Margaret was waiting up for her, anxious to hear every detail of the night. When Lily arrived and told everything that had happened, mother and daughter cried together, not from sadness, but from joy and relief. "My daughter, you made me prouder today than on any other day of your life," said Margaret, hugging Lily. "You showed a courage I never had." "I learned from you, Mom," Lily replied. "You taught me that our dignity doesn't depend on what others think, but on what we know about ourselves." The following week, Lily received more professional invitations than she could handle. The exhibition organized by Victoria was an absolute success, with several pieces sold on opening night. More important than the financial success, however, was the recognition that her talent had finally found the audience it deserved. Caleb, for his part, faced the consequences of his actions with his father and with his own friends, who began questioning him about why they had participated in something so cruel. The transformation of the joke into a triumph for Lily forced him to re-examine many aspects of his own personality and values. 3 months after the gala, Lily opened her own studio in a small commercial space downtown. Clients who met her at the gala became regular customers, and her schedule was filled with orders for the next 6 months. Richard became not just a client, but an informal mentor, offering advice on business management and helping Lily navigate the business world. He saw in her not only artistic talent, but entrepreneurial potential that deserved to be developed. The atelier became more than just a business. It transformed into a meeting point for people who valued genuine art and quality craftsmanship. Lily hired 2 assistants, young people who, like her, faced prejudice but possessed real talent. Victoria Sterling became an active advocate for Lily's work, including her creations in regular events and helping to establish a sophisticated clientele that appreciated authentic art. The professional partnership evolved into a genuine friendship based on mutual respect. Evelyn followed every step of Lily's success with the satisfaction of someone seeing an emotional investment bear fruit. Sarah's dress had fulfilled its purpose of creating a memorable special occasion, and her daughter's story was being honored through Lily's triumph. The most significant transformation, however, happened to Lily herself. The experience of the gala, from the discovery of the original cruelty to the final triumph, had taught her valuable lessons about dignity, forgiveness, and self-worth that permanently shaped her character. She never again doubted her own value or allowed the negative opinions of others to define her self-perception. Professional recognition was rewarding, but the inner confidence she had developed was the true treasure earned. 1 year after the philanthropic gala, Lily was invited to give a talk on overcoming adversity and entrepreneurship at a conference for young business owners. She accepted the invitation, seeing it as an opportunity to inspire others facing similar challenges. "Sometimes," she said to an attentive audience, "the most difficult situations in our lives are actually opportunities in disguise. When I discovered I had been invited to that gala as a joke, I had 2 options: to play the victim or to empower myself. I chose to empower myself." The talk was an absolute success, yielding more invitations and establishing Lily as a respected voice on topics of inclusion and personal triumph. Her concrete example of turning cruelty into opportunity inspired hundreds of people. Caleb, who had attended the talk out of curiosity, approached her at the end of the event. The 2 had not seen each other since the night of the gala, and he wanted to express something he had been thinking about for months. "Lily, I wanted to thank you," he said, clearly nervous. "Thank me?" she asked, surprised. "For teaching me that being cruel didn't make me superior, for showing that real dignity has nothing to do with money or social position. You helped me become a better person." Lily smiled with the sincerity that had become her trademark. "We are all learning to be better people," she replied. "The important thing is not to stop trying." 5 years after the gala, Lily had built a creative empire that included not only the original atelier, but also a school of handicrafts that offered scholarships to low-income youth. Her journey had become legendary in the artistic circles of New York City. Margaret worked alongside her daughter, handling the administrative side of the business and serving as a mentor to other parents of children with special needs. The professional partnership had further strengthened the relationship between mother and daughter. Richard remained a close advisor, and his company had become a supplier of materials for Lily's atelier. The professional relationship had evolved into a familial friendship, with Lily being considered almost like an adopted daughter. Evelyn, now nearly 80 years old, spent her afternoons in the atelier, telling stories to the younger students and passing on traditional techniques she had learned decades before. She had become the unofficial matriarch of the small creative community Lily had built. Sarah's emerald green dress was displayed in a place of honor in the atelier, accompanied by a plaque that told its story and dedicated the space to the memory of all the people who had dreamed of acceptance, but left before seeing their dreams come true. The atelier's 5-year anniversary party brought together hundreds of people, clients, students, suppliers, friends, and family, in a celebration that demonstrated the positive impact one determined person can have on an entire community. During her thank you speech, Lily looked out at the gathered crowd and saw faces of all ages, social classes, and backgrounds. What they had created there was exactly the kind of inclusive and welcoming environment she had always dreamed of. "When I received that fake invitation 5 years ago," she said into the microphone, "I never imagined it would lead me here. Sometimes what seems like our greatest humiliation is actually our greatest opportunity." The applause that followed was warm and prolonged, coming from people who knew her story and admired not only her talent, but her journey of personal transformation. That night, after all the guests had left, Lily sat alone in the atelier, surrounded by her own creations and those of her students. She thought of the insecure young woman who had received a mysterious invitation years ago and could barely recognize herself. The journey had been difficult, marked by moments of pain and disappointment, but also by incredible discoveries about her own strength and the kindness that existed in the world. Every obstacle overcome had become a stepping stone to something greater. Margaret found her daughter in this nighttime reflection and sat beside her in comfortable silence. The two women observed the space they had built together, each thinking about how their lives had changed so unexpectedly. "Do you regret going to that gala?" Margaret asked softly. "Never," Lily replied without hesitation. "It was the most important night of my life, not for what it could have been, but for what it became." "And if they had succeeded in humiliating you?" Margaret pressed. "Then I would have learned a different but equally valuable lesson," Lily said philosophically. "Sometimes we lose battles to win wars. Sometimes humiliation teaches us more about our strength than triumph does." The conversation stretched into the early hours, mother and daughter sharing reflections on courage, dignity, and the importance of never letting the cruel actions of others define our own worth. It was a conversation they had had many times, but one that never became less meaningful. When the sun rose over New York City, it found Lily in the atelier, not alone in melancholy reflection, but working on a new creation. Art continued to be her way of transforming experiences into beauty, pain into inspiration, challenges into opportunities. The piece she was working on was a complex embroidery that visually told the story of a young woman who had received an unexpected invitation. Emerald green colors dominated the composition, paying homage to the dress that had changed her life. It was her most ambitious work yet, destined to be the centerpiece of the next exhibition. Every stitch of the embroidery was applied with the precision she had perfected over the years, but also with the emotion of someone who had lived every moment of the story being told. It wasn't just art, it was autobiography, transformed into visual expression. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. The following years brought even greater recognition for Lily's work. Her creations began to be exhibited in contemporary art galleries, not as curiosities or stories of overcoming adversity, but as works of genuine artistic merit that deserved to stand alongside the best works of her generation. The School of Manual Arts attached to the studio expanded to include not only sewing and embroidery, but also other forms of traditional American craftsmanship that were at risk of disappearing. Lily became an active advocate for cultural preservation, working with artisans from different regions of the country. Richard, now in his 60s, had found in his relationship with Lily a way to honor not only the memory of his sister Alice, but also to reconnect with values he had lost amid his business success. He became the official patron of the school, funding scholarships for talented young people. Caleb, transformed by the experience years before, had completely changed his life's trajectory. He abandoned the irresponsible behavior of his youth and dedicated himself to community work, specializing in social inclusion programs. The encounter with Lily had been the catalyst for a genuine personal transformation. The friendship between Caleb and Lily, although initially unlikely, had developed over the years based on mutual respect and the understanding that people can change when confronted with the consequences of their actions. They occasionally worked together on charitable projects. Margaret, now recognized as the co-founder of her daughter's enterprise, had become a sought-after speaker on topics related to raising children with special needs. Her experience and wisdom helped other families navigate similar challenges. Evelyn, even at an advanced age, remained a constant presence in the studio. Her accounts of traditional techniques were recorded by the younger students, creating a valuable archive of knowledge that might have been lost with her generation. The legacy of Sarah's emerald green dress had expanded far beyond its original purpose. The story had inspired a book written by a local journalist, which was later adapted into an award-winning documentary at national festivals. Lily always hesitated to accept the role of a symbol or inspiration. preferring to be recognized simply as a competent craftswoman who had worked hard to achieve her goals. But she understood that her story had the power to inspire others facing similar challenges. During an interview for an art magazine, the reporter asked Lily what had been the most important moment of her journey. She thought for a few minutes before answering with the characteristic sincerity that had made her known. "The most important moment wasn't when I received my first recognition, or when I opened the studio, or when I sold my first piece," she said. "It was when I decided to go to the gala even after discovering I had been invited as a joke. That's when I chose who I wanted to be." The answer perfectly summarized the philosophy that had guided Lily over the years, the idea that we are defined not by the circumstances we face, but by the choices we make in the face of those circumstances. The 10th anniversary of the studio was marked by a special exhibition that brought together works by Lily and all the students who had passed through the school over the decade. The exhibition was a visual testament to the multiplier effect one determined person can have on a community. Among the exhibited pieces was the autobiographical embroidery Lily had created years before, telling the story of the unexpected invitation. The work had become iconic, reproduced in art books and studied in courses on personal expression through textile art. At the exhibition opening, Lily reunited with many people who had been important in her journey. Victoria Sterling, now a close friend, had organized several exhibitions of Lily's works over the years. Eleanor Vance, the curator who had discovered her on the night of the gala, remained an active advocate for her work. Even some of the young people who had participated in the original prank attended the exhibition, not out of obligation or embarrassment, but out of genuine admiration for what Lily had achieved. The transformation of everyone involved in the original story was a testament to the power of forgiveness and the possibility of personal growth. During the opening speech, Lily looked at the diverse audience that had gathered to celebrate not only her 10 years of work, but also the creative community that had formed around the studio. There were students, teachers, business people, retirees, children, and the elderly, a true representation of society. 10 years ago, she said, I received an invitation that changed my life. Not because it was real, but because I chose to make it real. Every person here today is part of that story, because you chose to see value where others saw difference. The applause that followed was not just recognition of her professional success, but a celebration of a life philosophy that had transformed not only Lily herself, but all those who had come into contact with her story. After the official ceremony, Lily retreated to a quieter corner of the gallery, where Sarah's emerald green dress was displayed in its honor case. She always visited this case at important moments, as a way to remember the origins of her journey. Richard joined her in this silent reflection, both looking at the dress that had catalyzed so many transformations. They had developed a tradition of sharing these reflective moments on important anniversaries. "Do you think Alice and Sarah would be proud?" Lily asked, as she always did on these occasions. "I'm absolutely certain," replied Richard, his voice filled with emotion. "They would have been thrilled to see how their dreams were realized through you." "Sometimes I feel I carry their dreams along with my own," Lily confessed. "It's a great responsibility, but also an honor. That's how we keep the memory of the people we love alive," said Richard, "by fulfilling the dreams they couldn't complete." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of young students who wanted to meet personally the artist whose work they had studied in school. Lily stepped away from the display case and devoted herself to talking with them, answering questions and offering encouragement for their own creative journeys. Watching Lily interact with the young people, Richard reflected on how she had become exactly the kind of person he wished Caleb could be, someone who used their talents and experiences to lift others up rather than put them down. Lily's success had not been limited to artistic or financial recognition alone. She had created a model for turning adversity into opportunity, showing that it is possible to maintain dignity and kindness even when confronted with cruelty and prejudice. Years later, when Lily was already nationally recognized as one of America's leading contemporary craft artists, she received a special invitation that moved her deeply: to serve as a judge for a national craft competition aimed at young people with special needs. The awards ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., bringing together talent from across the country. Lily Miller sat at the judges' table with the awareness that her presence there represented not only her own success, but the hope of hundreds of young people facing challenges similar to those she had overcome. During the evaluation of the entries, Lily was impressed by the quality and originality of the creations presented. Each piece told a story of perseverance, creativity, and determination that echoed her own experience, but with unique variations that enriched the national artistic landscape. First place was awarded to a 17-year-old girl from rural North Carolina who created ceramic sculptures using only one hand due to cerebral palsy. The technique she had developed was innovative, and her works had an expressiveness that moved all the judges. "When I started," said the young winner during her acceptance speech, "people told me ceramics were impossible for someone with my limitations, but I discovered that limitations are just invitations to be more creative." Lily felt tears welling in her eyes as she heard the words. It was as if she were hearing an echo of her own journey, confirming that the personal transformation she had experienced was not unique, but part of a larger movement of people determined to overcome obstacles. After the ceremony, Lily spoke at length with several of the participants, offering advice and establishing contacts that could help their careers. She remembered how important the people who believed in her during her first steps had been. The trip back to New York City was an opportunity to reflect on how much her life had changed since that night at the gala, over a decade ago. From an insecure young woman working in the back of a workshop, she had transformed into a nationally respected mentor. Margaret Miller was waiting for her at the airport, curious to hear about the experience in Washington, D.C. Mother and daughter had maintained the habit of sharing all important experiences in detail, continually strengthening the bond that united them. "How was it?" asked Margaret when they got in the car. "Incredible," replied Lily, still emotional. "I saw so many talented young people who reminded me of myself 10 years ago. But they have an advantage I didn't have. They know it's possible. Thanks to people like you," Margaret observed with maternal pride. "Not just me," corrected Lily. "Thanks to everyone who chooses to see possibilities instead of limitations. I was just the first of my generation to have that opportunity." During the drive, Lily told her about each of the young people she had met, their unique talents, and the barriers they had overcome. It was evident that the experience had renewed her passion for mentorship and her commitment to inclusion in the art world. Back at the studio, Lily found a surprise her team had prepared during her absence, a new section dedicated specifically to students with special needs, with adapted equipment and personalized methodologies, developed especially for different types of physical or cognitive limitations. The initiative had been coordinated by her lead assistant, a former student who had specialized in inclusive education after going through Lily's program. It was a perfect example of how a mentor's impact multiplies through their mentees. "We want to officially expand to become a national center of excellence," the assistant explained. "With your reputation and our experience, we can help many more people." The proposal was ambitious but feasible. The studio had built a solid reputation over the years, not only for the quality of instruction, but for the demonstrable results in terms of transforming lives and developing talent. Lily Miller accepted the challenge with the characteristic enthusiasm she applied to all important projects. She knew that expanding would mean more responsibilities, more administrative complexity, but also far more opportunities for positive impact. The expansion project took 2 years to be fully implemented. It involved partnerships with universities, government support for inclusion programs, and a crowdfunding campaign that exceeded all expectations, demonstrating public support for the work being done. The inauguration of the Lily Miller National Center for Inclusive Art was an event that brought together authorities, artists, educators, and most importantly, hundreds of people whose lives had been touched directly or indirectly by the pioneering work started in the small studio. During the opening ceremony, Lily gave a speech that summarized her life and work philosophy, built over more than a decade of transformative experiences. "Art is not a privilege for the few," she said to the gathered crowd. "Art is human expression, and every human being has something unique to express. Our role is not to judge that expression, but to help each person find their own creative voice. The newly opened center was much more than an expansion of the original studio. It was a teaching and production complex that included adapted workshops, exhibition spaces, a research area for inclusive methodologies, and an artist residency program for young talents from across the country. Evelyn, now over 85 years old, cut the symbolic ribbon alongside Lily. The ceremony was a tribute not only to the work developed, but to all the people who had contributed to making that moment possible. Richard Harrington, present as the center's main patron, watched the ceremony with the satisfaction of someone who had invested not only money, but emotion and hope in a project that had surpassed all expectations. His relationship with Lily had transformed not only her life, but his own as well. Caleb was also present, now as the coordinator of one of the social inclusion programs supported by the center. His personal transformation had been complete and genuine, turning him into one of the most dedicated advocates for a cause he had once tried to ridicule. The national press covered the inauguration extensively, focusing not only on Lily's business success, but on the innovative model of social inclusion through art that the center represented. The media impact generated international interest, with educators from other countries visiting to learn about the methodologies developed. In the months following the opening, the center received over 1,000 applicants for the programs offered. Demand significantly exceeded initial capacity, forcing an expansion even faster than had been planned. Lily found herself in the unusual position of being approached by investors interested in expanding the model to other cities in the US and even to other countries. The proposals were financially tempting, but she was cautious about maintaining the integrity and quality of the programs developed. "Growth without purpose is just expansion," she said during a meeting with potential investors. "Our purpose is to transform lives through art. Any growth must serve that purpose first." The refusal of some lucrative proposals demonstrated that Lily had maintained the values that had guided her from the beginning, prioritizing social impact over financial gain. It was a stance that further increased the respect she commanded in both artistic and business circles. 10 years after the inauguration of the National Center, Lily Miller received one of the country's highest honors in the field of education and social inclusion. The award ceremony took place at the White House, attended by the highest government authorities and representatives of international organizations. During her acceptance speech, Lily chose to tell the full story of her journey, from the fake invitation she received 20 years earlier to the present moment. It was the first time she had publicly revealed all the details of the original prank and how she had chosen to turn it into an opportunity. 20 years ago, she said to the solemn audience, I received an invitation to a gala as part of a cruel joke. The goal was to publicly humiliate me for being different. Today, I receive this honor for having used that experience to help thousands of people who are also different to find their own paths. The impact of her revelation was extraordinary. The story spread rapidly through social media and traditional media, generating a wave of reflection on bullying, inclusion, and the human capacity to transform adversity into purpose. Caleb Harrington, watching the ceremony on television in his hometown, felt a complex mix of emotions. Seeing Lily receive national recognition for work that originated in his own youthful cruelty was a constant reminder of how our actions can have consequences that go far beyond what we imagine. Richard Harrington, present at the ceremony as a special guest, cried openly during the speech. Lily's journey had also become his own journey of redemption, a way to honor Alice's memory through concrete actions in favor of inclusion. Margaret Miller, now in her 70s, watched from the front row with the pride of a mother who had raised not only a successful daughter, but a person who dedicated her success to the good of others. The decision to support Lily on the night of the gala had been the best investment of her life. After the official ceremony, there was a reception where Lily spoke with educators, artists, and authorities from across the country. Many of these people shared stories of how her work had influenced their own approaches to inclusive education. A young art teacher approached Lily during the reception with a particularly touching story. She said she had been inspired by Lily's example to work with autistic children, developing methodologies that had transformed the lives of dozens of families. "You didn't just change your own life," the teacher said. "You created ripples that continue to spread, touching people you don't even know." This was exactly the kind of multiplier impact Lily had dreamed of achieving when she made the decision to turn a painful experience into a life purpose. Knowing that her example had inspired others to do similar work was more rewarding than any individual award. On the trip back to New York City after the ceremony, Lily reflected on the extraordinary journey she had lived. From an insecure young woman working in the back of a sewing workshop, she had become a national reference in inclusive education and social transformation. But what impressed her most was not the external recognition, but the person she had become throughout the process. Every challenge faced, every obstacle overcome, every person helped had contributed to shaping a character she herself admired. The National Center continued to grow, not only in size, but in sophistication and impact. Academic research based on the methodologies developed by Lily was being conducted at prestigious universities, contributing to scientific knowledge about inclusive education. Some of the first students from the original studio had become teachers at the center, creating a generational continuity that ensured the preservation and evolution of the values and methods Lily had established. It was the materialization of her dream to create something that could exist independently of her personal presence. On a quiet afternoon, 25 years after receiving the invitation to the gala, Lily sat alone in the original studio, which had been preserved as a historical part of the National Center. The small space where it all began was now filled with memories and meaning. The display case with Sarah's emerald green dress remained in the same spot, but it was now surrounded by photos, thank you letters, and small objects that told the story of the hundreds of people who had passed through the programs developed there. Lily opened a special drawer where she kept items of particular sentimental value. Among them was the original invitation to the gala, yellowed with time, but still legible. She only held it on very special occasions as a tangible reminder of where it all began. Next to the invitation was a letter Caleb had written years before, formally apologizing and thanking her for the way she had transformed his youthful cruelty into a life lesson. The letter had arrived spontaneously, without her asking or expecting it. Margaret entered the studio quietly and sat beside her daughter, recognizing the moment of reflection Lily tended to have periodically. Mother and daughter had developed a rapport that allowed for these moments of shared silence. "What are you thinking?" Margaret asked softly. "I was thinking about how everything could have been different if I had made other choices," Lily replied. "If I had chosen bitterness instead of forgiveness, victimhood instead of overcoming." "But you didn't make those choices," Margaret observed, "and that's the kind of person you are." "Perhaps," Lily said thoughtfully, "or perhaps I became this kind of person because of the choices I made. Sometimes we don't know who we are until we're tested." The conversation touched on themes they had discussed many times over the years: fate versus choice, innate versus developed character, the role of suffering in personal formation. They were philosophical questions that gained practical relevance through lived experience. Evelyn, now nearly 90, arrived at the studio pushed in a wheelchair by one of the youngest assistants. Despite her physical frailty, her mind remained lucid, and her presence still carried the accumulated wisdom of decades of experience. "My dears," she said in the soft voice that age had made even sweeter, "may I join you in this serious conversation?" The 3 generations of women gathered in an intimate circle, each representing a different perspective on life, overcoming, and purpose. It was the kind of moment Lily knew would become a precious memory. "Mrs. Evelyn," Lily said, "you've told me about Sarah many times, but today I'd like to know, what do you think she would think about all this?" Evelyn smiled at the question, clearly touched by the continued consideration Lily showed for her daughter's memory. "Sarah would be overjoyed," she replied without hesitation. "She always dreamed that her art could touch other people, make a difference in the world. Through you, that dream has come true in a way she could never have imagined." "And you?" Lily asked. "Do you have any regrets about lending me the dress that night?" "My only regret," Evelyn said with a twinkle in her eyes, is that I haven't lived long enough to see all that is still to come. The answer moved Lily and Margaret deeply. Evelyn had become more than just a generous neighbor. She was an additional maternal figure, a bridge to the past that gave context and depth to the present. That same evening, Lily received an unexpected call from Victoria Sterling, the organizer of the original gala. Victoria, now retired, was calling to say she had decided to write a book about events that had marked her career, and she wanted to dedicate an entire chapter to the night that had changed Lily's life. That night was transformative for everyone present, explained Victoria. Not just for you, but for all of us who witnessed how dignity can triumph over cruelty. The book proposal interested Lily, who saw in it an opportunity to formally document her story for future generations. She agreed to collaborate on the project, offering not only her personal perspective, but also access to the archives and documents she had preserved over the years. The book collaboration process took several months and involved detailed interviews not only with Lily but with all the people who had been important in her journey. Richard, Caleb, Margaret, Evelyn, and dozens of others shared their perspectives on the events of that night and its consequences. When the book was published 2 years later, it immediately became a national bestseller. But more important than the commercial success was the educational impact it had, being adopted in schools as study material on bullying, inclusion, and personal transformation. The publication of the book generated a new wave of interest in Lily's story, resulting in invitations for international speaking engagements and proposals for film and television adaptations. She selectively accepted these invitations, always prioritizing opportunities that could amplify her message of inclusion. One of the most interesting proposals came from a production company interested in creating a documentary that would follow current students at the National Center, showing how the methods developed by Lily worked in practice. It was a way to update her story, to show the continued impact of her work. Lily accepted the documentary proposal on the condition that the narrative focus on the current students and teachers, not on her personally. She wanted the film to demonstrate that the inclusion movement had grown far beyond her individual story. The documentary was filmed over a full academic year, capturing intimate moments of personal transformation, talent discovery, and overcoming challenges. When it was released, it won awards at international festivals and became teaching material used in education courses around the world. During the documentary premiere, held at the National Center itself, Lily had the opportunity to see her story through the perspective of other people. It was exciting, but also humbling to observe how her personal experience had transformed into something much bigger than herself. One of the most touching moments in the film was an interview with one of the first students from the original studio, now an established artist who had followed in Lily's footsteps by creating her own inclusion programs. Seeing the cycle complete itself in this way validated everything Lily had worked for. After the screening, during the question and answer session, a young woman in the audience asked a question that surprised Lily with its depth and maturity. "Lily, how do you maintain hope when you face prejudice every day? How do you not become bitter?" The question touched on the core of something Lily had developed over the years, but rarely articulated clearly. She thought for a moment before answering. "I've learned that becoming bitter doesn't change anything that happened to me in the past, but it can destroy everything I can build in the future," she said. "So I choose every day to focus on what I can create, not on what was taken from me." The answer generated spontaneous applause from the audience, but for Lily it was simply the honest articulation of a life philosophy that had been tested and refined through decades of experience. That evening, while organizing materials after the event, Lily found a letter that had been left anonymously on her desk. The letter was from a teenager who had watched the documentary and been inspired to pursue her own artistic dreams despite facing similar challenges. "You showed me it's possible to turn pain into purpose," the letter said. "Thank you for proving that people like me can dream big." Reading the letter confirmed for Lily that all the work, all the challenges, all the difficult nights had been worth it. Knowing her story continued to inspire young people to believe in themselves was the greatest reward she could receive. Margaret found Lily reading the letter and noticed the tears in her eyes. Without needing to ask, she understood they were tears of gratitude and fulfillment, not sadness. "Another life touched," Margaret observed softly. "More proof that our story isn't just ours," Lily replied. "It belongs to everyone who chooses to turn their hardships into stepping stones for something greater." The two women stood in comfortable silence, each reflecting on the extraordinary journey they had shared. It was a journey that had begun with pain and humiliation, but had transformed into something beautiful and meaningful through conscious choices and dedicated work. 30 years after receiving the invitation to the gala, Lily was preparing to celebrate her 52nd birthday. The celebration would be more than a personal party. It would be a gathering of the entire community that had grown around the work she had started. The National Center now operated in 15 American cities and had inspired similar programs in other Latin American countries. Thousands of people had gone through the programs developed, many of whom had become multipliers of the methodology in their own communities. Lily had married a few years earlier to an art teacher she met at one of the international conferences she attended. The wedding had been a simple celebration held in the garden of the National Center, attended by hundreds of people whose lives had been touched by her work. Margaret, now a grandmother to 2 young children, divided her time between helping with the grandchildren and continuing to work at the center as an emeritus advisor. At 78, she maintained the vitality and wisdom that had been fundamental in raising Lily. Evelyn had passed away peacefully at 93, surrounded by Lily, Margaret, and dozens of people who considered her part of the family. Her legacy lived on not only through Sarah's dress, but in the traditional techniques she had passed down and the life philosophies she had shared. Richard, now in his 80s, continued to be an active patron of the center, but had gradually transferred his responsibilities to Caleb, who had become one of the organization's most competent administrators. Caleb's transformation had been complete and lasting, turning him into one of the most passionate advocates for the cause of inclusion. During the birthday party, Lily gave a speech summarizing 3 decades of reflections on life, purpose, and personal transformation. She spoke to an audience that ranged from former students, now grown to children who had just begun their programs at the center. 30 years ago, she said, I received an invitation that changed everything. But today I understand that the true invitation didn't come from people who wanted to humiliate me. It came from life, inviting me to choose what kind of person I wanted to be in the face of adversity. The applause that followed was warm and prolonged, coming from people of all ages who had found in Lily not just a mentor, but a living example that it is possible to transform any experience into personal growth. During the party, Lily moved among the groups, talking with former students who were now established professionals, with current students who were discovering their talents, and with the families who had entrusted their children to the center's programs. One of the most significant conversations was with a mother who had brought her teenage daughter to meet Lily in person. The girl faced challenges similar to those Lily had faced decades before, and her mother hoped the meeting could inspire her. "Lily," said the mother, "my daughter sometimes loses hope. She thinks she'll never be able to have a normal life because she's different." Lily knelt to be at eye level with the girl and spoke with the sincerity that had characterized all her interactions over the years. "You know what I learned?" she said gently. "Normal is just a setting on the washing machine. You don't need to be normal. You need to be you, the best way you can be." The answer made the girls smile for the first time that night, and Lily saw in her eyes the same glimmer of possibility she had felt decades earlier upon receiving the invitation to the gala. The party lasted into the early hours, with performances by current students, exhibitions of work created over the years, and plenty of conversation and fellowship. It was exactly the kind of event Lily most appreciated: informal, inclusive, and focused on celebrating collective achievements. When everyone had finally left, Lily and Margaret were alone organizing the space, a tradition they had kept since the first events at the original studio. "Mom," said Lily as she put away some decorations, "do you regret anything about our journey?" Margaret stopped folding towels and looked at her daughter with a thoughtful expression. "You know something," she finally said. "I regret doubting you that night. If I had supported you from the beginning, without hesitation, perhaps you wouldn't have felt so much fear." "Mom, your fear was natural," replied Lily, "and your protection taught me to be cautious without being cowardly. Everything happened the way it needed to happen." It was typical of Lily to transform even regrets into positive lessons. Margaret admired her daughter's ability to find value in every experience, even the most difficult ones. The next morning, Lily woke up early and went to the center's garden, a peaceful space where she liked to begin important days with a few minutes of reflection. It was a tradition she had developed over the years, a way to connect with her core values before facing the day's demands. The garden had been created as a living memorial to all the people who had contributed to the center's history. There were plants dedicated to the memory of Evelyn and Sarah, a fountain in honor of Richard and Alice, and a special flower bed maintained by the students themselves as a way to actively participate in the space. Sitting on a simple wooden bench, Lily watched the morning movement of the city beginning in the distance. New York City was waking up once again, full of people pursuing their dreams, facing their challenges, making choices that would define their lives. She thought of all the people who, at that very moment, were facing situations similar to what she had faced decades before. Young people being rejected for being different, families struggling to find opportunities for their special children, individuals trying to figure out how to turn limitations into possibilities. The responsibility of being a role model for these people sometimes weighed heavily on Lily, but it was a weight she carried with honor. Being living proof that transformation was possible was both a privilege and an obligation. Margaret joined her in the garden, bringing 2 cups of coffee and the day's newspaper. It was another morning ritual they had developed, a quiet way to start the day by sharing simple yet meaningful moments. "What comes next?" asked Margaret, referring to the future plans for the center and for Lily's life. "More of the same," Lily replied with a smile. "More people to help, more talents to discover, more possibilities to explore." "And personally," insisted Margaret, "do you and your husband talk about children?" It was a question Margaret asked occasionally, concerned that her daughter's dedication to work might interfere with other aspects of her personal fulfillment. "We do," confirmed Lily, "but we also talk about adoption. There are so many special children needing families that perhaps that is our role." The answer didn't surprise Margaret. It was typical of Lily to think first about how she could help others, even in intimate personal decisions like starting a family. That same day, Lily received a call that moved her deeply. It was from the young woman who had won the national crafting competition years before, when Lily had been a judge. The woman, now an established artist, was calling to say she had been selected to represent the United States at an international inclusive art exhibition. "Lily, I wanted you to be the first to know," said the emotional young woman, "and I wanted to thank you. Without your example and encouragement, I never would have believed this was possible." "The credit is all yours," Lily replied sincerely. "I just recognized the talent that was already there." "But you showed me it was possible to dream big," insisted the young woman, "and now I want to be for other people what you were for me." It was exactly this kind of conversation that confirmed for Lily that her work was creating the multiplier effect she had always dreamed of. Every person inspired became a new source of inspiration for others, creating waves of transformation that spread far beyond her individual reach. After the call, Lily reflected on the concept of legacy. She had started simply by trying to turn a painful experience into something positive, but the result had grown far beyond anything she could have imagined. The true legacy, she realized, was not in the awards she had received or the public recognition she had achieved. It was in the lives transformed, the talents discovered, the families strengthened, and the gradual change in social perception about people with differences. Margaret, observing her daughter's contemplative expression, recognized one of the moments of deep reflection that Lily had periodically. They were important moments when she processed the meaning of everything she had built and renewed her motivation to continue. "What are you thinking about?" Margaret asked softly. "I was thinking that perhaps the biggest change hasn't been in my life, but in how other people see possibilities," Lily replied. "When I started, being different was automatically seen as a limitation. Today, at least some people can see difference as diversity." "Do you think it's enough?" asked Margaret. "No," Lily said honestly, but it's a start. And maybe that's all one generation can do, start a change that the next generations will complete. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a group of new students for an orientation class. Lily Miller rose from the bench, bid farewell to Margaret Miller with an affectionate kiss, and headed toward the main building to begin another workday. Watching the new students enter the center, each carrying their own hopes and insecurities, Lily felt the same emotion she always felt in these moments, the emotion of witnessing the beginning of new journeys of discovery and transformation. Among the new students was a 15-year-old boy, walking with crutches due to partial paralysis in his legs. He looked around with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension that Lily recognized immediately. It was the same expression she herself had worn upon entering the gala hall decades earlier. Lily approached the boy and introduced herself simply, without unnecessary formality or condescension. She had learned over the years that the best way to welcome people was to treat them with the same naturalness she would wish to receive. "First time here?" she asked gently. "Yes," replied the boy, still a bit shy. "My mom said that here I can learn to make beautiful things even with, even being like this." Lily smiled at the innocent honesty of the comment. It was exactly the kind of perspective she had worked for decades to change, the idea that people with differences needed to overcome their characteristics to create something of value. "You know what I learned?" she said, echoing the conversation she had had with the girl at the birthday party. "The most beautiful things in the world come exactly from our differences, not in spite of them." The boy looked at her with renewed interest, as if hearing an idea he had never considered before. It was a moment Lily had witnessed thousands of times, but which never lost its emotional impact. The moment when a person begins to see possibilities where before they saw only limitations. "Would you like me to show you some of the creations made by students who started here in your situation?" offered Lily. "You would do that?" asked the boy, clearly excited by the prospect. "Of course," replied Lily. "Actually, it's one of the parts of my job I enjoy the most." As she led the boy through the galleries where former students' works were displayed, Lily felt the deep satisfaction that always accompanied these early mentoring moments. It was as if she were planting seeds she knew would grow in directions impossible to predict, but certainly positive. The boy was impressed by the quality and diversity of the works on display. There were sculptures created by people with only one hand, paintings made by blind artists using tactile techniques, and complex embroidery created by people with cognitive limitations who had developed unique aesthetic sensibilities. "Were all these people like me when they arrived here?" asked the boy, clearly in awe. "Not exactly like you," corrected Lily. "Each person is unique, with their own talents and challenges. But yes, they all arrived here thinking their differences were obstacles, and they all discovered they were actually advantages." "How can not being able to walk properly be an advantage?" asked the boy with the direct curiosity characteristic of teenagers. Lily stopped in front of a particular sculpture, created by a former student who had used a wheelchair. The piece incorporated elements of mobility into its structure, transforming medical equipment into expressive art. "Look at this sculpture," she said. The artist who created it said he would never have thought to use wheels as an artistic element, if not for his own experience. His limitation became his creative signature. The concrete example helped the boy understand the concept Lily was trying to convey. It wasn't about denying or minimizing real challenges, but about finding creative ways to transform them into distinctive and even valuable elements. By the end of the tour, the boy was visibly transformed. His initial shyness had given way to a genuine excitement about the possibilities opening up before him. It was a transformation Lily had witnessed hundreds of times, but one that never failed to move her. "When can I start?" asked the boy eagerly. "You've already started," replied Lily. "The moment you walked in here and decided to believe it was possible to create something beautiful." The rest of the day proceeded with the center's usual activities: practical lessons, individual guidance sessions, planning meetings, and the 1,000 small details that kept the operation running smoothly. But Lily carried with her the renewed energy she always felt when connecting with new students. That evening at home, she told her husband about the boy with crutches and how she had recognized in him the same mixture of fear and hope she herself had felt decades before. It was a conversation they had often, analyzing the parallels between different students and Lily's own journey. "Do you think he'll be successful?" asked her husband. "I think he'll have his own version of success," replied Lily, "which may be completely different from mine, but equally valid and important." It was an important distinction Lily had learned over the years. Success wasn't about replicating her own path, but about finding personalized ways to grow and contribute that were authentic to each individual. That night, before sleeping, Lily performed her habitual ritual of mentally reviewing the day, identifying moments of gratitude and opportunities for improvement. It was a practice she had developed as a way to maintain perspective and continue growing personally. The day's greatest moment of gratitude had definitely been the encounter with the new student, not only for the opportunity to help him, but also for the reminder it brought of her own journey and of how many people had contributed to making it possible. The opportunity for improvement she identified was the need to develop new guidance materials that could help families better understand how to support children with differences. It was a project she had been considering for months, and that perhaps was time to prioritize. Margaret, who lived in an annex to Lily's house, stopped by to say goodnight as she did every night since her daughter had married. It was a moment of daily connection that both valued, a way to maintain family intimacy, even with changes in the household structure. "How was the first day for the new students?" asked Margaret, curious about the group that had arrived that week. "Inspiring," Lily replied simply, "especially one boy who reminded me so much of myself in the beginning. Same insecurity, same hidden hope." "And did you tell him about the invitation?" asked Margaret, referring to Lily's original story. "Not yet," said Lily. "I think I'll wait for him to settle in a bit before sharing more personal stories, but maybe eventually." Margaret agreed with the cautious approach. She had been with Lily long enough to understand that timing was crucial when it came to sharing personal experiences with new students. "Sometimes," Margaret said thoughtfully, "I wonder where we'd be if you hadn't received that invitation." "Probably somewhere different, but not necessarily worse," replied Lily. "Opportunities come in many forms. If it hadn't been the invitation, it would have been something else." "Do you really believe that?" asked Margaret. "I believe that people determined to grow always find ways to grow," said Lily. "The invitation was just one of many possible doors. It could have been another." It was a mature perspective Lily had developed over the years, the idea that specific events were less important than one's overall posture toward life and the opportunities it presents. The two women said goodnight with the traditional family kisses, and Lily retired to her room, where she found her husband already asleep with a book about artistic teaching methods open on his chest. She gently removed the book, adjusted the covers, and lay down beside him, feeling a simple gratitude for having found a partner who not only understood her passion for her work, but actively shared it. Before falling asleep, Lily looked out the window at the city lights, stretching into the distance. Somewhere in that vast urban expanse were thousands of people facing their own challenges, making decisions that would define their lives, choosing between hope and despair. Her hope was that at least some of those people would find ways to transform their difficulties into opportunities, just as she had done. Not necessarily in the same way, but with the same fundamental determination not to let external circumstances completely define their destiny. With this quiet reflection, Lily fell asleep, knowing that the next day would bring new opportunities to contribute to that process of transformation in at least a few lives. It was all a person could hope to do, plant seeds and nurture them so they might sprout. Lily's sleep was peaceful, filled with dreams where young people with differences discovered unique talents and families celebrated achievements that had seemed impossible at the start. They were the kinds of dreams that reflected not only personal hopes, but transformed memories of realities she had helped to create. End of story. Now, dear listeners, tell me what you thought of this moving story. Do you believe Lily made the right decisions? How would you react in a similar situation? Leave your sincere reflections in the comments. We love hearing your perspectives. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to leave your like and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other inspiring stories. Thank you for your company and see you next time.